Do you ever use manual settings when you shoot videos? My answer is you should. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how manual settings can enhance the quality of your videos, of your content, but also how your skills can take benefit from it. Stay tuned and let's get started. Ciao belli, welcome to a new video. Today is going to be a conversation just between us two. We're going to talk about manual settings and how they can really help you out with your content and the quality of your content. Lately, in the past years, I've been using manual settings for all my shoots, whether they're professional shoots or vlogs or whatever type of video I'm making. I'm just using manual settings. The first reason is because my camera is a cinema camera, and cinema cameras usually don't have auto settings, which is great, so you can actually practice and master photography and videography and really understand either the camera gear, but the basics of photography and videography. You could ask me why I'm using manual and not auto, and that's the question I was waiting for. Well, auto is a very simple way to make videos, usually not the most accurate. Manual settings for me equal control over the image. I can really take the video I want with the settings I need for that specific scene, for example. Let me explain in more details. When I talk about control, I talk about exposure, the exposure triangle. I also talk about the tone of my image, so the temperature and the tint, the light in general, but also about the focus. First of all, of course, I'm gonna pick a frame rate I'm filming at. It can be from 24 frames per second up to 120. And that depends on what I'm shooting, the type of scene, and the subject I'm filming as well. So that's the first thing I'm picking, but that doesn't really come down to the settings. That's the first choice I make. So that's gonna be my project frame rate or my filming frame rate. If you wanna know more about frame rates, actually go and check this video up here or find it in the description tab. The most important feature, probably why I'm choosing manual settings, is the exposure triangle. It's called exposure triangle because it's made of three different options or three different features: the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. I'm not gonna go through all of them. That's a different vlog. So those are the basics of photography. I'm gonna leave it for a different course, and actually check my courses down here. But let's talk about the first point of the exposure triangle, which is the aperture. Through the aperture, which is referred to the diaphragm in your lens, I can let as much light as I want hitting the sensor. That's the first thing I want to control when I'm filming videos manually. From the aperture also depends the depth of field, for example, and I want to control my depth of field. I can create shallow depth of field or deeper depth of field, maybe to highlight a specific subject in the environment or to blend many subjects in the same environment. So if you want to create a nice bouquet, that's from the aperture, so something you want to have control on. When you use auto aperture, for example, and you want to go from a darker area of your environment to a brighter area, the camera adapts automatically from dark to bright, and when you have to go in post-production and color grade your footage, it's gonna be a very difficult job. So that's why also I like to use a manual aperture, so I can have more control in post-production during the color grading and match the clips properly. The second point of the exposure triangle is the shutter speed. So from my frame rate, it depends also the shutter speed, which is usually double the frame rate. So if I use 24 frames per second, my shutter speed is usually 1/48 of a second. And why do I choose the shutter speed manually? Because of course I have control on the motion blur. So having a shutter speed which is double my frame rate, that reproduces for me and for filmmaking in general. That's one of the rules of cinematography, that reproduces a kind of natural motion blur. But if you use auto shutter speed, the shutter speed may vary according to the light. So if you go from a darker area to a brighter area, the shutter speed might change and the look just is not the same and the clips don't match. Also, some clips of your video might be too blurry because the camera was trying to adjust the shutter speed to compensate the lack of light by slowing down the shutter speed. And other clips in brighter conditions might look too jittery because the camera is trying to increase the shutter speed. I also want to have full control of the shutter speed because of the flickering. Sometimes with artificial lights you have some flickering going on, and by changing the shutter speed manually, it can help me to control that flickering and sometimes actually delete it completely. The last point of the exposure triangle is the ISO. The ISO is the sensitivity of your sensor to the light. If you increase the ISO too much, you will have a lot of noise in your image with grain, and so the image is not gonna look great. And once again, I want to have control on the noise and the ISO. I usually want to keep the level of my ISO quite low, sometimes up to 400 maximum. Then it depends on the cameras. Some cameras can manage to handle the noise a bit better, but the older cameras or different cameras in general don't. So that's why you want to keep your ISO low, and that's why I use manual settings for that. Then manual settings are great also for controlling the tone of my image. So the temperature of the light and the tint I want to give to my image. In that way, through the manual settings, I can choose the perfect white balance for my image, and I can match the camera with my light temperature as well. For example, today I'm filming with the light which is 5700 Kelvin. I'm gonna match exactly the same temperature, the same Kelvin in the camera. Once again, that's gonna help me in post-production to match all the color correction for each clip. In the past, I used to use auto settings for the white balance and the temperature many times when using a GoPro, so an action camera, which is easier, But then when I go back in the studio, I want to match the clips. It's just gonna take forever to really adjust the color correction for each individual clip, and manual settings will allow me to have exactly the image I want. Then we're gonna talk about something else. We're gonna talk about manual focus, why I switch from auto to manual. I know auto, again, it's simpler. You just point your camera and hope for the best. And that's why I'm going with a manual. I don't want to hope for the best. I want to film the best. And to have the best image, this is the only way for me, is to set the lens to manual focus. Usually there's a switch on the lens. You can go from auto to manual. I always make sure it's on manual. And again, you might ask, why are you switching from auto to manual when the lens and the camera can do everything for you? Well, that's not exactly it. With manual focus, I make sure I film what I want, first of all. So I'm always sure I'm filming what I need. With the autofocus, you never know. Sometimes the lens and the camera, are just trying to pick the subject, but they don't know what you want to film. So you might also have this effect of going back and forth, the focus trying to pick something, and it doesn't really work. And that's the first reason why I'm using manual focus. To be honest, also, sometimes I make mistakes with the focus manually. So maybe I take a bit of time to find my subject, focusing, but when I find it, I stick to it. And I like that feel of finding your subject. When I watch a video and I realize it's been filmed with manual focus, it kind of gives me that feel of a human being behind the camera. So it's an organic movement. It's something still nice to watch. And I really like that, because when you use autofocus, you realize it's the camera moving, it's something digital, and it's not human. So that's why I like manual focus as well. And I like to make mistakes sometimes with the focus. Another reason why I use manual focus is I can choose how long I want to stay on the subject for. So if I want to keep the focus on the subject for 5 seconds and then move to a different subject, I can if I have manual settings. But on auto, again, I'm not sure what the camera is doing. So the camera is trying to put something in focus, but you never know the duration of that focus. If something happens, if someone passes in front of the camera, the focus is gonna switch, and that's not what I want. You are not in control. Then of course we're gonna talk about pulling the focus while using gimbals. Sometimes it's very useful on gimbals to have autofocus, but once again, I usually shoot manual. And if you want to see how I film with manual focus by using a gimbal, go and check this video, which also you can find in the description tab. You can also find all the gear I'm using and the products and the companies I'm collaborating with. So go and check them out in the description tab. When using gimbal, usually you move around your subject, and that's when I really want to use manual settings instead, manual focus, because I have a follow focus system on the gimbal and I can really pull the focus as I want on my subject. These are the main reasons why I use manual settings and manual focus for my video shoots, but actually I use manual settings also for photography. To recap, manual settings equal control. So I recommend to go and practice to use manual settings and pull the focus manually. This will enhance the quality of your content, but also it will be useful to you if you want to make this your career. Many companies, when they hire you for a shoot, maybe they hired already some camera gear that you need to be able to use. Sometimes they hire cinema cameras, as the one I'm using right now, without auto settings. So you want to make sure you get on set and you know what you're doing and make sure you nail the shots they need. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit different from the tutorials and the camera gear reviews you find on my channel usually. And I would love to make more of these videos actually. So if you have any content you want me to talk about, anything you want to learn about video making, video editing in general, just drop a comment down here and let me know what you think. Also, go and check my online courses. I've got hundreds of students already there, so I'm really looking forward to seeing you there too. Hit the subscribe button if you learned something new. If you want to learn more, go also on Instagram where you can find me at Mamo Air. As always, I wish you the best and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. God bless you.
Seems all good times come and go your way. Child memories fall under rolling